Okay, colleagues. Thank you for coming. It's the last panel, but I believe that it's one of the most important panel. Allow me to ask our colleague to present a resolution. Today it's 8 March. All the women know what means this. I hope that the men also. Please, you have the floor before we start our panel.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we hope that all of our colleagues will inside in the room. I have to present you an initiative of one of our colleagues, Madame Veronique Waterschut, from the Vice Chair of Defense Committee from Belgium. In this afternoon, we had a commune coffee break with the ladies, and based on her initiative, we decided to have a declaration with the women in this Interparliamentary conference. I will read the text, which I hope that is a gift for the ladies and for our men colleagues too. So, European Women's Deputy Declaration. Today is the day. Today is the day of international women's rights. Today is the day of dialogue. Therefore, we specifically ask more women to take the floor. Thanks to Romanian EU presidency, we had the opportunity to discuss the future of European foreign affairs and defense during the last 2 days. We, women of national and European Parliament, want to share our opinion on inclusive vision of European geopolitics and defense strategy. Therefore, we want our 5D vision to be heard: dialogue, democracy, diplomacy, development, and defense. We, women, are convinced that all these Ds do play a crucial role in avoiding tension and solving conflicts. Our 5D vision is a foundation for world peace and safety, especially for European countries and their neighbors. To implement these, the world needs women. Today, we, women of nation and European Parliament, are ready to take the engagement to make it work, and in the meantime, we invite women all over the world to join us. And each member of parliament, member of delegations of the national parliament, women are signed this declaration. Thank you for it.
Thank you. I believe that we can adopt by acclamation this short declaration, not because we are a very friendly person with the women and today it's 8 March, but the women remain all the time important, even for the defense community and for the defense policy. I will switch in Romania. It's a pleasure for me to chair this panel here in Bucharest, in my own country.
My name is Norica Nicolae. I am a member of the European Parliament, the Vice President of the ALDE group in the European Parliament. I am now just a substitute member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. In the previous mandate, I was the Vice Chair of this committee. I am one of the Romanian members in the European Parliament that has always strived to put a fingerprint on the security and defense policies of the European Union. Let me now begin by sharing with you a few ideas on this topic, because it is my opinion that it's been an important political choice to put it forward in this conference and to tackle the Western Balkans. Unfortunately, While tackling we talk about the Western Balkans only in special situations, and I would venture as far as saying that in the diplomatic arena there hasn't been sustained concern for the Western Balkans in the EU. The Bulgarian presidency requested this topic on the agenda of the presidency. The Romanian presidency supports this idea, and I hope we would have real support for the Western Balkans on behalf from the EU, because we need to acknowledge it. It's not only the concerns for the immediate neighborhoods which are important for the EU foreign policy. The Western Balkans are not a matter for foreign policy, in my opinion. This is a fundamental issue of internal cohesion, and the Western Balkans are a determining factor in forecasting or providing the future for all the European citizens. That is why I think that today we will have positions that will be shared, not necessarily along the lines of the political correctness, and I'm sure that we will tackle the Western Balkans issue with a lot of responsibility, and not only I think we will tackle this topic with the determination that is required by this region in Europe. Let me now introduce to you the first speaker in this panel in order to have a pretty alert pace for this panel. Let me therefore introduce my friend and colleague Victor Boștinaru. I would venture as far as saying that Victor is not only a good expert on the Western Balkans, but he is also one of the European MPs who puts a lot of heart into it. Albania has been always one of his major concerns, for me, Macedonia and Serbia, and currently Victor, even though he doesn't work for the... oh yes, you are a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs. You're full-fledged members. Wonderful. Because Victor is one of the most concerned people and one of the most relevant voices on Western Balkans in the European Parliament. Victor, I give you the floor. I don't think any other recommendations on you are required, at least for the Romanian audience. You're one of the most vocal voices of Romania in the in the European Parliament.
Distinguished speakers, when I started in 2007 my mandate in the European Parliament, I was thinking of the Western Balkans. At that time, it was a bit strange to speak about enlargement towards the Balkans. Now I'm in 2019, and for many people, the perspective of joining for the Western Balkans is more and more a sort of ad calendas grecas. And why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because in substance, in the recent years, the Western Balkans made good progress. First, the stability. The second, a deepening the regional cooperation. It is equally a contribution for the European Union security. Looking to the key countries, good progress in the negotiation talks for Serbia and Montenegro. The dramatic, initially, dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina in order to address one of the most painful, most devastating dilemmas for the Western Balkans, and yet only under the influence and the perspective of joining, the two sides decided to sit and to talk. Then Albania. Albania, who, just to quote from the...
Speaker should speak into the microphone.
Okay, just to quote from the European Commission report, Albania made very good progress, including in the vetting process for the judges, which is probably unprecedented, not only for the Western Balkans, but for a much broader picture. It's the same in the case of Northern Macedonia, Severna Macedonia, and Greece. Who would imagine a couple of years ago that the two sides will sign the historical deal on the name issue? And yet they did it, and the very engine of the signature and then the ratification process was the perspective of joining EU and NATO for Severna Macedonia. So there are results, but in the same time, there are still pending problems. And the only reason to advance for the region, like for my country, like for Bulgaria and others who have joined the Union initially, was one day we will be in. We will join this Union, and this gives us reason to advance, to accept the painful, sometimes, reforms, to accept social sacrifices, and yet to be part. This is why, first, the Romanian rotating presidency is very much committed for the reason, for the joining of the Union by the Western Balkans, and in the same time, it's my plea to all my colleagues, MEPs and members of the national parliaments from a bit much un-Western side of the Union. Colleagues, I know and I'm familiar with the fact that on key topics, sometimes one dossier or another, it's taken hostage by different domestic political agendas. But now we have to choose. Either we will agree in June to open the negotiation talks with Northern Macedonia and Albania, to speed up the talks with Montenegro and Serbia, and to provide a robust answer for Kosovo, and by doing that to guarantee the stability and the progress, economic, social, democratic progress in the Western Balkans. This is one potential development, or the other one, it's the crisis. Because the picture in the Balkans is not only black or white. It's black and white and gray. Rosy, it's missing. But I will tell you something else. In this region, with all the achievements they made, we have the parliamentary boycott. It was painful for the Macedonian parliament to adopt the constitutional changes, and yet they did it. But one political side decided to miss this historical opportunity. There is an attempt to boycott the parliament in Albania. In Montenegro, one side is boycotting the parliament. In Kosovo, the boycott of the parliament was quite oftenly exercised. In Serbia, the opposition is equally boycotting the parliament. And based on my elementary knowledge on democracy, the boycott of the parliament is just the opposite of the democracy. But it shows alarming if the trend will have no European integration perspective and redress. This can turn into political instability. And you and me, we know the name of the game. Political instability in the Balkans means crisis, means nationalism, means populism, means confrontation. And I will invite to all of you, each and every of you, think in the most pragmatical terms. What we have to choose between integration and to open up one chapter or two chapters, it's practically symbolical, because the process can only be fully implemented after something like close to 10 years' time. But to reject this proposal, to miss such an opportunity, it's practically a direct invitation to instability. So please judge before taking the decision to pay more for the instability, for the confrontation. We know in the Western Balkans, initially, Europe was only the payer, not the player. And it is a difference between payer and player. Or to accept that by opening the chapters of negotiations and securing an European perspectives for those countries, to continuously assist them, encourage them, work with them to stabilize the situation. And I will conclude by saying, usually we, Europe, we proudly say we are a global actor. Beautiful. But if such a global actor is unable and fail to integrate less than 20 million people living in 5 countries, what kind of global players we are? Shall we bear the responsibility of seeing instability growing just in our neighborhood? And let me to conclude by saying that get it right and we can lead in the creating a safe, secure and prosperous Western Balkans, firmly embedded into the West. Get it wrong and our ambivalence of today may produce a crisis tomorrow. And this is not playing with words. Think seriously and think pragmatically. Third actors are already there. I mean Russia, I mean China, I mean Saudi Arabia. All are there, are in. And they are exploring and exploiting the vacuum, if the vacuum will be created by us. So once again, let's see the realities and the truths and give the people of the Western Balkans the chance to be part of our European project first and above all in the benefit of our continental stability and strengthening our global role. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you, Victor, for your provocative statement. Fortunately, many of us, members of European Parliament, especially the Romanian, we share deeply your vision. But I hope that this year the European Union will be more wise than previous year. One country left, we need to have new member for being full, integrated and cohesive Europe. It's in our interest to have you in, not out. Because Victor need to leave, he has some family problem. I want to thank you again for your presentation, and I hope in the next conference we have enough time in order to share, because I believe that you have a lot of questions. Thank you, Victor. Our next speaker is Tanya Miskevich. I'm okay with the Miskevich. Tanya is the chief negotiator for Serbia accession negotiation with the EU. Tanya worked like state secretary in the defense ministry in Serbia. Tanya is a professor. I'm happy because I believe that your expertise is necessary for your job today, and I hope for Serbia that the best man for this job you are, Tanya. They choose you. And me personally, I want to listen to you. What are your vision? But I am interested also if you can elaborate a little bit on the current evolution of the situation in Kosovo in light of the new development in the Kosovo Parliament. If you agree, because for us, for Romania, it's an issue, you know, about our position on the Kosovo, and we hope that we don't find and we can assist to some problem related to the not respect of some international agreement. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to discuss the issues of the enlargement policy of the European Union in front of the parliamentarians, both EU Parliament, European Parliament, but also national parliaments. Because the enlargement process is very much rooted into the work of the parliaments as such. It's the new development, it is something which is a novelty in terms of the discussion within the parliament. So there are a lot of you that have to decide about the very important political decisions on us, on those countries which are willing to become member of the European Union. A very important and interesting discussion by Mr. Boștinaru, which is not a surprise to us. We all know him and his enthusiasm. But let me just give you a few details about the not neglecting the fact that you are very well informed, that the Western Balkans actually entered the story of European integration only beginning of 21st century. That since then, we also not only changes our systems, institutions, public administration, but also our societies in accordance with the European agenda of each and every of the Balkan countries. That we are also facing and faced in past a lot of political issues, not only bilateral, but internal political issues, each and every of the countries, in terms to reach the levels that we are right now. I'm not saying that to excuse ourselves for being slow, but also to explain why the situation now is very complicated one, and that why Mr. Boștinaru, as well as I am, saying please have a very close look on what is going on in the Western Balkans. It's important for you to be aware what are the developments, both negative but also a positive one, like the deal between North Macedonia and Greece for sure, or the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. To tell you the truth, I am not part of the dialogue deliberately, because I am heading the negotiations between Serbia and European Union, and the dialogue is not part of the negotiation for the membership. That's why dialogue exists as a separate. Dialogue is something which is a novelty for us. It is closely monitored through the negotiation process. So each and every of 28 member states, 28 member states has the opportunity to assess is the dialogue is progressing. But not only the dialogue, but also I will put the emphasis on something which is for us of the immense importance, and this is rule of law, which became the novelty for the negotiation process, and that is something that, of course, is the biggest, the most difficult, longest, the reform that is very difficult to prove. Because that reform actually, it's not only to reform your legal, even constitutional system, but also to create the new institutions and to start producing so-called track record of the work of those institutions, which is, as you can imagine, very difficult if you are working both of those things together. We are very happy that since the Bulgarian presidency continues through Austrian and now Romanian, and it will be continued even with the Finnish presidency with a, if I may say, with a huge importance of the Croatian presidency to the Council of European Union beginning of 2020, that the Balkan is finally one of the priorities, and I could not agree more with what you said. This is not part of the common foreign and security policy. This is actually part of the cohesion policy of the European Union, the completion of the European Union. We are the enclave inside the Europe as the institution. But the enclave where things are not rosy, as we said, and there are a lot of both bilateral disputes that are trying to be solved, even border disputes. There are a lot of repercussion of the 90s. So the reconciliation in the region is one of the very important words. And then there are other problems like the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, which I cannot call the bilateral dispute for obvious reasons. As I told you, I'm not participating, but let me share you some data. In Serbia, there are 2/3 of people of public opinion saying that they are pro-dialogue, that they are positive and supporting the continuation of the dialogue. And that was a very good element for the president and the government to start discussing with the public. We had a public debate last year about the results of the dialogue. Span of results is unbelievable. From status quo to recognize the independence, and everything that you can imagine is between those things. With a huge interest to put it not as a part of the integration process, but as a part of the normal life, of continuous normal life in the region. The most important document is, of course, Brussels Agreement, 2013, with a lot of positive developments, but one which was not adopted, and this is the Community of Serbian Municipalities. Nothing has happened with the community. And then, at some point last year, October, if I'm not wrong, Pristina introduced the taxes to the goods, and as you said, violating not the bilateral but the regional agreement, which is the CEFTA agreement, without the proper explanation, without the proper argumentation why they are doing. I cannot imagine, I'm a political scientist, I cannot imagine the introduction of the tax measures you will explain with the diplomatic activity. So it's not enough of the argument. Of course, that in the situation like this, there was no possibility for the dialogue. And only yesterday, if I'm not wrong, Kosovo Assembly adopted the platform for the continuation of the dialogue, which is not acceptable for Serbia for sure, because it does not start from the resolution, which is the only document, 1244 of the Security Council, asking for the recognition of Kosovo as a state, which is contrary to this resolution. So obviously we will see how things are going to develop. There is a strong voices from the international community urging Pristina to leave the tax duties, but obviously things are not moving. And one thing, I'm sure that we are going to have the opportunity to discuss this, do not neglect Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Boštinaru did not mention Bosnia. It's equally important for Bosnia and Herzegovina to gain the status of candidate for progressing in terms of the European integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya? Certainly there is another important issue. Is still the international law important? Because we face today, what we face today, it's a kind of neglect of international law, but we see the evolution. Now I have the pleasure to introduce our colleague from Greece, Professor Kostas Douzinas, professor in London, but member of Greek Parliament, working in the National Defense and Foreign Policy Committee. I want to confess you that in the European Parliament we fully support the candidature of your Prime Minister to the Nobel Prize. I believe will be an important sign to have this new, the two Prime Ministers who can have this important prize. And we continue to support what you decide to start, a process for peace in Europe. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Loretta. Wow, after 4 years and 8 interparliamentary conferences are followed, like many of you, I'm now given the chance to have the last word, and I'm going to use it. Because I will speak with my academic hat on, mainly, and of course, also in relation to the Western Balkans in the second half. I want to start by giving you a kind of brief geopolitical state we're in. We live throughout the world, but also, of course, here in Europe and in the Balkans, in an age of anxiety, uncertainty, fear. The old bipolar system is on the way out, and a new system which we do not know as yet how it's going to shape is on the way in. We're moving towards a multipolar world and eventually a new bipolarity between the United States and China. We don't know yet. The old has not died yet, and the new has not been born. As Antonio Gramsci would say, this is the age of the monsters. And we do live, to a certain extent, in an age of monsters. What are the characteristics of this transitional phase, this interregnum that we're going through? First, a partial withdrawal of the United States, certainly from the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean, a turn towards Asia, a turn, rhetorical at least, away from its position of supporting and defending open markets and being the sheriff of the world, and a certain decline of what we used to call the West. In the next 30 or 40 years, if you read the academic literature, there is a clear expectation that there will be a major shift of power and capital from the north to the south and from the west to the east. The population flows that we've been experiencing recently is a clear part of this rearrangement of the international balance of forces. And of course, if we're thinking exclusively in terms of defending borders, we will lose, I think, an extremely important opportunity, particularly here in Europe, in order to create or to be centrally involved in a new world dispensation. I called it the age of the monsters because what has been happening, unfortunately, over the last few years is the rise throughout Europe, including my own country, of an extreme nationalistic Eurosceptic, often racist, anti-Semitic and Islamophobic right wing, which is threatening the very foundations of the European Union. It's threatening the two major pillars of the European Union, which are, of course, prosperity based on solidarity, and secondly, the pacification of ethnic disputes and indeed wars that we have experienced in the past. So what I'm really pleading for, and I don't see it, certainly not in our conferences, is for a new look at how the world is at this minute and how it is moving. We're into pretty much short-term solutions to problems that are not going to go away. If we now turn to Europe very briefly, in 2017, 2 years ago, the European Union celebrated its 60th birthday. And part of the 60th birthday, particularly in President Juncker's plan, was exactly the enlargement in the Western Balkans. Serbia and Montenegro were even given a date, 2025. The others were promised that the process would eventually start if certain conditionalities and preconditions were met. However, that celebration of the birthday was overshadowed, on the one hand, by a divorce, to use the family metaphor further, and instead of family integration, that was the great promise of the Juncker message, we have the rise of this delinquent child. That political, ideological, extremist and populist view, which is actually threatening the very European Union. And it is at this point that we have to take stock. It is at this point that we have to start thinking again whether we are committed, and we continue to be committed, to those basic values of the European Union and the Enlightenment, or whether we're going to go into our own individual ways. Whether protectionism and isolationism, something that President Trump rhetorically at least proposes, whether that kind of approach will take hold of what is the most successful example in human history of collaboration amongst the states. And here the Balkans, as far as I'm concerned, are a very good example of the way in which we should go as a European Union in terms of a wider planning for the future. And of course, the Prespes agreement between Greece and North Macedonia gives a very good, I think, starting point to a process of rebuilding certain key ideas and institutions in the European Union. Historically, no empire, no single power was able to dominate the Balkans for a long period of time. The multiplicity of nations, of languages, of religions was such that no single player could actually impose their own interests, although they tried for periods of time, the Ottoman Empire, of course, but not for too long, because other players and national liberation movements always brought that idea of a single power dominating the Balkans to an end. And it is precisely for this reason why the European Union and secondarily NATO are so good for the Western Balkans in terms of the stability of the region. Because, of course, the European Union is not a single player. You have all kinds of nations, of languages, of cultures, of religions, and to that extent, every nation within the Balkans and the Western Balkans finds friends and allies in the European Union. So that is the first thing. The European Union is the single actor that is existentially in a good position in order to unite the Western Balkans and give them a sense of purpose, a sense of hope. And of course, secondly, the economy. Of course, everyone says economics is very important. But for the Western Balkans, particularly because of this multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious aspect of the region, economic development in a region which is well underdeveloped by European standards is a key aspect of any further move. So these are the characteristics that make, it seems to me, the Western Balkans the obvious place where the European Union should focus its energies in the next period. And the North Macedonia-Greece agreement, the Prespes agreement, gives an excellent, I think, model about how new developments in the region should proceed. Let me speak very briefly. Perhaps you know the agreement. I don't want to go into the details. Let me speak about the philosophical basis of this agreement. The philosophical basis of the agreement is precisely the philosophical basis of what multicultural societies have done over the last 30, 40 years in Canada, in Britain, in France, in order precisely to bring the different cultures and religions and languages together. In other words, respect for the dignity of the other person, respect for the identity of the other person. And precisely that idea, that philosophical and moral foundation of the Prespes agreement is what I think makes it into a good and fair deal. Obviously, North Macedonia changed its name, erga omnes, domestically and internationally, and she had to change, to amend its constitution to do that. Similarly, Greece withdraws and has withdrawn all objections to North Macedonia's membership of international organizations, NATO and the EU, and at the same time, it has recognized that, and both have recognized, that while we cohabit a geographical area called Macedonia, a larger geographical area than what each of the countries occupies, we have separate traditions, separate histories, and this is to be respected. Now, it seems to me that this idea of respecting the dignity and identity of the other person is precisely the kind of approach that has to be pursued both in the Serbia-Kosovo situation, but also in Bosnia-Herzegovina and even widely. Let me finish by saying what is the situation at the minute after the Prespes agreement. As far as we're concerned, Greece and North Macedonia, of course, we're starting a long series of implementation measures in order to make sure that this is not something that stays in the books of international law. So we have put together, and we're putting together various committees in order to start economic activities, trade, increased trade between the countries, cultural, university, media, and energy links. But this is precisely what has to happen in the wider Balkans. Already we have multilateral agreements and meetings between Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, North Macedonia, and others, in order precisely to use this model of changing competition into cooperation, of making this region from what used to be called derogatory Balkanization and Salad Macedon. That was the Western, a little derogatory term for us here in the Balkans. We were bon pour l'Orient. That was the Orientalist idea, that these people are not up to the standards that we have in Paris or in London. And when the Western Europeans used to say, we never had a war since the Second World War in Europe, clearly they forgot that the Balkans are part of the Europe. And unless we move forward in the process of integration and enlargement, the ghosts of the past may come back. So economic collaboration, political collaboration, and finally international collaboration. And here I'm going to finish. It seems to me that now we have a window of opportunity. The Prespes Agreement has created a momentum, and this is the momentum that the other major players in the Western Balkans, but also the Balkans more generally, have actually to adopt in order to push forward that kind of positive spirit that has been created. As far as the European Union is concerned, after losing one member, after the divorce of Brexit, it has to recommit itself to the enlargement process, because at the minute we're not clear what the position is. A number of major players are not interested in enlargement. Others are saying differently. It seems to me that during the Romanian presidency, and then next the Finnish and the Croatian, we need to recommit to a clear time frame within which this process will take place. There is enlargement fatigue, I hear. There is enlargement fatigue both in Brussels and in the Balkan capitals. But this is something we have to defeat, because it seems to me that at this point, the existential crisis of the European Union, something we should be discussing more but we haven't, is such that we need precisely some successes. We had the Prespa Agreement, perhaps the most important success of European diplomacy. It seems to me we have now to move further the enlargement process and help the Western Balkan states to integrate within a renewed European project. And if that happens, Balkanization and the Salad Macedon will become terms of pride and not attacks by the Western Europeans towards us who come from the Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Certainly, it's really important to have Prespa agreement like a first step for stability in the area. But we need action in June on behalf of European Union. You spoke about Gramsci, but I believe that the entire Frankfurt School can be used for explaining what's happened in Europe, but not only, including for some...
Horkheimer, Adorno,
yes, Marcuse. Yeah,
I think it is important that we should be discussing some of these issues here, not just the technical questions.
Certainly. Thank you. Colleagues, we have until 3 o'clock, time for debate. I ask to... It's enough time, I believe. My colleague from Romanian Parliament approved me, yes. You agree that we have until 3 o'clock. Now, who want to take the floor? First, Ms. Margareta Söderfeld.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am a member of the Swedish delegation, And first of all, I would like to thank the Romanian chairmanship for the hospitality and arrangement of this important conference. And then I do also want to say that the last panel make me very happy to see strong, competent women on the floor as speakers, because I must say that the first three panels really disappointed me, with including no women. I do also would like to say that I really congratulate for the declaration that was adopted earlier, but I hope it could be read before the final declaration. I see it as very important that the declaration made by the women here could serve as a signal to the political word that it have been done during this conference. And finally, when it comes to Western Balkan, it's very important that the member countries of European Union do everything to support the development in Western Balkan. And I could also say, because I serve as Vice President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, that we have the Western Balkan on our agenda. And we discuss and debate a lot how we could support the development. And I believe that we, as member countries, can do a lot here from the European Union to support the improvement of democracy, rule of law, and economical growth, of course. And I do also would like to add one thing that I have noticed from other arenas, is that the Russian engagement is growing in Western Balkan. But we shouldn't let this be the overall topic. We need to focus on the need in all aspects on Western Balkan for a successful integration. And I don't want to have any comments on this. I just want to make it noticed. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Our next speaker is Ms. Dubravka Filipovski. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am Dubravka Filipovski, member of Parliament of Serbia. Distinguished panelists, thank you for your presentation. Strategic commitment of Serbia to the EU membership is indisputable. All the countries in the region which have not become EU members have such ambition, and Serbia gives strong support for that. And each advancement of our regional partners is in its favor. EU will not be complete until all the countries in the region become its members. Today, EU is facing the multidimensional crisis, but regardless of that, the EU model represents the highest attempt degree of integration in the modern political history. We welcome the EU approach according to which the progress of each country is evaluated according to individual merits, the principle of regatta accession to the EU. Connecting the process of normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina in opening other negotiation chapters can have only detrimental and counterproductive consequences on the Serbian European integration process, which we believe is not the interest of the EU. Dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina has stalled because unilateral decisions and non-fulfillment of the agreed obligation is disrupting factor for the dialogue and confidence building. Yesterday in Pristina was adopted a very discutable declaration for Belgrade. In the context of EU accession, Serbia attaches great importance to the regional cooperation. The relation in the region and the cooperation are therefore the key priorities of foreign and security policy, so that we want them to build on the foundation of peace, stability and mutual trust and understanding. I would be grateful if you could briefly comment on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam, for your intervention. Next speaker, it's my colleague, Doru Frunzulică from the European Parliament. Doru, you have the floor.
You skipped my name?
Sorry. Please, Doru, expect a little bit. Ms. Vjosa Osmani Sandriu.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a big pleasure to be in Bucharest together with you all. Since I come from the Kosovo Parliament, and I guess I'm the only one I can speak on behalf of that country, let me make a couple of points. First of all, every single member of parliament in the Republic of Kosovo, so 100%, and especially the party that I come from, are very much in favor of dialogue. We believe that's the only way to resolve disputes, and that is why we support the process. Secondly, we heard earlier from the panelists that the European Union needs to have a robust answer for Kosovo that guarantees stability. For that reason, every political party in Kosovo until now has clearly stated that ideas for border withdrawals in the Balkans are going to destabilize the region and endanger the peace and stability that we've achieved so far. For that reason, we call on the European Parliament, as well as on the national parliaments, not to support such ideas, the current effect of which is certainly creating confusion, and the future effect of which is going to be destabilizing not just our region, but also third parties, which will be abusing that idea to use it for their illegal annexations. Let me talk a little bit on the dialogue. A little bit more. We heard a lot from the panelists about the implementation of agreements, not just according to us as politicians, but also according to the civil society, both in Kosovo and Serbia, as well as according to the European Union. Kosovo has implemented 32 out of the 33 agreements, whereas the opposite is the case for Serbia. So only 1 or 2 agreements have been implemented, whereas most of them, including the agreement on justice, the agreement on energy, and others, have not been implemented. The tariff that was imposed by Kosovo was also mentioned, but ladies and gentlemen, we should not forget that this tariff did not come out of the blue. It is a defense mechanism for all of the violations by Serbia on principles of neighborly relations, and it is there as a defense mechanism for all of the violations on our sovereignty, blockages for membership in international organizations, and so on and so forth. And just a final comment, yes, a final comment. Resolution 1244 was mentioned and international law was mentioned. The International Court of Justice has decided that Kosovo's independence is in line with international law, and that the legal regime of Resolution 1244 ended on the day when the status of Kosovo was resolved on the 17th of February. Finally, let me call on everyone to support visa-free regime for Kosovo, because it's only hypocritical to support a visa-free regime for Colombia and Venezuela and not for a country that is at the heart of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to remind you that the organizer asked me to cut after 2 minutes. Because we need to cover, maybe there are some colleagues who want to intervene, and unfortunately the time is really, really difficult. Doru, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In fact, allow me to congratulate, first of all the panelists, of course, the moderator, and allow me to tell you that probably, you know, strategically and geostrategically, all these countries from Western Europe are meant to become one day members of the European Union, because the European Union cannot afford, you know, as it used to be a black hole in the middle of Europe and now a kind of gray hole. Then by all means they have to join the European Union, but for this definitely they need, you know, economic reforms, on good governance, of course reforms, reconciliation, rule of law, and so on and so forth. Yes, we are facing a historic window of opportunity nowadays, and you know, enlargement has to be seen about the future of the European Union. As the European Union is facing nowadays so many challenges, you know, the Brexit, the terrorism, illegal and irregular migration, unemployment of youth, financial issues, disagreements among the member states about the future of Europe, engagement with the Western Balkans might be an answer. And for this, ladies and gentlemen, besides effective reforms, besides fragmentation of the European Union commitment to enlargement, we need a new momentum. Because as you remember, we had this Berlin process for the Western Balkans. But it was mentioned here, there is a kind of fatigue. Probably the European Union has to come with a Berlin plus process and agreement, strategy and program for the Western Balkans to join the European Union, if it is possible, earlier than later. And then we have to look afterwards to the Eastern Partnership, to the Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. And this is a question, how you see a new strategy for the Western Balkans to be implemented in the next future? Thank you.
Thank you, Doro. Our next speaker is Mr. Iohannis Kefalogiannis from Greece.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In my personal view, there is a paradox here. I mean, talking about Western Balkans. In one hand, in 2018, it was a very good year for the European perspective of Western Balkans. We've seen the Bulgarian and Austrian presidencies worked hard to achieve progress. The Commission published its strategy for the Western Balkans. The Sofia Summit laid down the Sofia priority agenda for the economic development and connectivity of the region with the EU. But on the other hand, we've seen, for example, Albania, that has not made significant progress since the June 2018 Council. On the contrary, there was a deterioration in the field of protection of minority rights and rule of law. We've seen in Kosovo the recent developments have not been positive, and there are counterproductive actions were taking, such as the imposition of excessive custom fees on Serbian and Bosnian imports. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the internal political stalemate continues, and the country will probably sink further into stagnation. So my question is, what are the reasons for this paradox? Is it just the fact that these countries have not started accession negotiations with the EU, or is it just like local politics and interests are stronger than the prospects of being a member of the EU? Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Mr. Harry Lokvenek from Macedonia. It's difficult to see something in this.
It's North Macedonia.
No.
North Macedonia.
North Macedonia.
Thank you.
Don't worry.
Dear Ms. Nicolai, distinguished MPs from national parliaments. Sorry, sir. Sir?
What's happened?
Да се тръгне. Thank you. It's very difficult to speak after my dear friend from Greek Parliament, Kostas. Thank you about very inspirative speech a few minutes ago. First and foremost, allow me to greet you and thank you for this opportunity to participate in the Interparliamentary Conference organized by the Common Foreign and Security Policy of the European Union, which is very important for the Western Balkan states' convergence with European Union. I believe that most of you are well acquainted with Macedonian story. These are historical times for my country, times when we defined a future and decide on the stability, security, and therefore on the prosperity of the Republic of North Macedonia. We faced many challenges. We made difficult decisions, but we are determined without hesitation to be a part of the most important world organization, NATO and the European Union. Our goal is to be promoters of peace and stability in the region, a region that has witnessed many conflicts and bloody events in the past. In the context, I would like to urge you to recognize the Republic of North Macedonia as an important partner in the promoting the values that we all strive for. Our goal is to create a lasting friendship and productive cooperation that will result in stability and prosperity through openness and cooperation with all countries, both in the region and the EU. I must emphasize that my country is strongly committed to the implementation of all reforms that arise from the integration process. We are aware that the progress is possible only if European standards are achieved. Our goal is to restore confidence in state institutions, discontinuing the concept of a system that depends on individuals, while building a system where institutions put the needs of the citizens at the forefront. A lot of work is ahead of us, but I'm convinced that with the support of the EU member states, we will be able to achieve the standards and become a full-fledged member of the European Union. Dear friends, the Republic of North Macedonia has shown that there is no issue that can be resolved. There is no problem that can be overcome, but it can be accomplished only if there is a real willingness to move forward. For example, PRESPA agreement. Second example is ratification of agreement with Bulgaria. Third and last in this moment is ratification of agreement with Romania. So that is very, very important examples what we already do. Therefore, today I can proudly say that we are no longer a sad story in the Balkans, but a promoter of good neighborly relations, stability and peace in the region. It is with great pleasure that I wish to point out the following. With the example my country has set, we have proved to the biggest Eurosceptics and anti-Europeans that it is the alliance, the cooperation that wins. Lessons from the past years have been learned. They are the best indicator that the strengthening of mutual trust and good neighborly relations and the enhancing of cooperation have led to greater connectivity in the region and create a better impression on the region. The Union will prove itself a world power only if it remains strongly committed to the enlargement, a process that promotes cohesion and growth. And I will finish. I wish to the successful story of the Republic of North Macedonia and the real decisions we made in the past are validated in real terms and result in a date for accession negotiation with the European Union in June.
Thank you, dear
It will
colleague.
be a strong motive for us, but also an incentive for other countries in the region. Thank you so much.
How happy you
Thank
are.
you.
And my colleagues support you, but you know, was a wise decision, a historical one. But for this decision, you have two, our Greek colleague and your country. Our next speaker is also one of my close friends. I give the floor to Bastian Belder, my colleague from the European Parliament.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We know how powerful women are in the European Parliament, and you are one of the examples. Firstly, I want to compliment our Romanian host for this impressive and excellent conference. My dear colleague Bostinaru asked me when I said it to him just a half hour ago. What do you mean is impressive? Is it surroundings? I said yes, but also, and that is especially important, the contents of this conference and also this panel. Thank you very much. I want to shortly address two issues. I traveled a lot as a journalist in the 90s here in the region, and now as an MEP. I'm trying to closely following the events, and I was last week in Albania. One issue that I want to address and ask for the views of the panel is a big problem of the brain drain, the perspective of the youth in the Western Balkans. This is very important. How do you look at it, and what could be EU contribution, also the contribution of our own parliament? And secondly, that is when we speak about strengthening the commitment to the Western Balkans, I'm convinced, committed to the enlargement process, the perspective of the Western Balkan countries to the European Union. No doubt, but what is important, there is indeed I must honestly say that with the upcoming European elections, also in my country, the Netherlands, enlargement process is almost a taboo. What is important that at the same time, and I'm a Protestant, I know from the churches, they are very committed, especially to Albania. So there is a fundament, a base for a commitment. And my question is therefore, how can we strengthen the people-to-people context, the grassroots movement, to support this process of the integration of the Western Balkans into the European institutions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Miro Kovac.
Mulțumesc. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. First of all, I'd like to say that when it comes to the Western Balkans, they are surrounded by EU member states. So the Western Balkans are in the heart of the European Union, if you want so, in our stomach. And it is not acceptable that there rests some kind of black hole on the European continent. So their future lies in the European Union, lies within the European family. I said earlier this morning that unfortunately, NATO has thus far shown to be more efficient when it comes to providing stability than the European Union. Our friends in North Macedonia are on their way to joining NATO. Montenegro joined NATO recently, and half of the former Yugoslavia is now part of NATO. So the countries in the Western Balkans have a European perspective. Croatia is one of the countries in the European Union in favor of enlargement. I would say that most of all the neighboring countries of the Western Balkans, including Greece, are countries in favor of enlargement: Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Croatia, Slovenia, even Austria. But the biggest countries in the European Union are not really pro-enlargement oriented. So we have to work with the biggest countries in the European Union, meaning basically our friends in Germany and in France, also in the Netherlands, which is understandable. I understand also their skepticism. But the resistance we can note is more or less restricted to the biggest countries, to the countries which founded European communities. So we have also to understand that it is up to our friends in the Western Balkans, to the countries there, really to do their homework efficiently. They have to fulfill the criteria prescribed by the negotiation framework. So now the most important thing is, of course, for the countries there, for the governments, to work hard on fulfilling the enlargement, the accession criteria. Once the accession criteria are fulfilled, my impression is that there will be not too much resistance in the biggest EU member states when it comes to enlargement. But today, as a politician in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, it is in Belgium, it is not easy to sell enlargement. People are fed up. So it is crucial for the countries there to fulfill the criteria, especially when it comes to judiciary and to home affairs. That's crucial, because what really makes the European identity abroad is the rule of law. So the rule of law is a fundamental criteria which has to be fulfilled by the countries which want to join the European Union in the Western Balkans. Mulțumesc, mersi mult.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker, Mr. Andronius Azubalis.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question goes to Mrs. Mišević. Mrs. Mišević, how could you explain sad-known Serbia's attitude towards EU common foreign and security policy? The data shows that in 2012, Serbia's decisions on EU common foreign and security policy matched with EU decisions in 90%. But in 2018, it drops till 50%. How these numbers correspond with your declared goal to speed up negotiations with the EU? It looks like you are distancing from EU common security and foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I believe that I can give the floor to our speaker in order to have the answer. Tanya, you first. Not only today,
Thank you very much. There were a lot of questions, but I will try to summarize the answers to some of those. We did not mention, and some of the speakers mentioned the strategy, which is actually the credible perspective. It's not the strategy per se, because it was not adopted by the member states, let me remind you. It has been notified that the document exists, but not approved by the member states, and that's also one of the tricky questions whenever we are discussing the integration of the Western Balkans. So the question was how to implement the enlargement strategy. Well, strategy is in itself 6 so-called flagship initiatives that's supposed to be devised further. One of those initiatives is enhancing the rule of law, but the elements should be developed by the European Commission. Since February last year, we don't have still a clear idea what they have in mind. We are very much interested. This morning I had a meeting with Minister Delegate Ciampa and also discussed this here, of course, in Bucharest, discussing the issue, and that is of the very big importance. But one correction to Professor Drusinas. So actually we were not promised 2025. 2025 is not promised only for the front runners, not only that was not promised for the front runners, which were Serbia and Montenegro, but also for other countries. Is inclusive year only once if we fulfill a set of criteria which are one paragraph long. So don't worry, it was not a promise. Very strong conviction of the European Union not to promise anything. One of the important reasons is what Mr. Kefaloganis said, and that is how we can explain the paradox. So actually, you will see more and more of those paradoxes, because there will be ups and downs in the integration process. The process as such is not easy at all to be fulfilled. And the important thing is, let's measure each and every of the candidate country in accordance with its own merits. That is one of the most important mantras. Let's progress as we are really progressing in the process. Some of the countries are progressing faster in some particular moment. Maybe Serbia, together with Montenegro, is now the front runner. Who knows what might happen tomorrow? Maybe somebody else will catch up, which I doubt. But nevertheless, that's a healthy marathon that we are going to have in the years to come. One of the issues that all Western Balkan countries are facing, it is brain drain. Unfortunately, we don't know the numbers because it started back in the 90s. And now you have a new wave of the brain drain, which is extremely difficult issue. The active measures, or the measures of the active support, each and every government has been established, but still we don't have any support coming from the European Union in that respect, which might help us. We know what is the reason. There are opens on the labor market in the member states for the labor force which we can provide, but which is good for the member states. But it's equally, it's not good for us in terms of the development. Some positive development in that respect has to be forged, has to be developed in the discussion regionally with the European Union for sure. The digitalization and the new technologies, as well as some of the measures like Erasmus Mundus doubling for exchange of students, which is great opportunity for young people to go to the MA or PhD, but then to return to country might be the element. But actually, one thing which I'm not sure that you are aware of, there is no active measure for supporting startups and small and medium enterprises for the Western Balkan countries. That is one of the possibilities to think into this direction, and that is one of the answers for people-to-people contact as such. Is extremely important for us to sit and discuss the venues, the opportunities for the cooperation. Mr. Kovac mentioned a very important thing, which is the reluctance, let's call it like this, of the big member states for the enlargement policy. Well, my argument is always, why not remind him what was the reason for the very establishment of the three communities? It was the peace project, but also economic development. So let's use us as the argument more for the further development of the European Union. And yes, we are well aware of the need for fulfilling the criteria. That is extremely important. Few elements for answering colleagues from Kosovo. This is as Professor said, that is my professor's hat. The advisory opinion of the court is the advisory opinion, not the decision. With the advisory opinion, you cannot abolish the resolution of the Security Council. I'm sure that you know that. So that means that the resolution 1244 still stands until there is a majority of member states, including those, or not protest by the permanent members of the Security Council, the resolution will stay. Regarding the taxes, up to now, Bosnia and us, we are the only one starting the procedure in terms of the introduction of taxes. We did not heard any objections or any negative statement or recommendation or the need for the activity by SEFTA that would come or that came from Pristina up to now. So we were not aware of the fact that there are problems in terms of trade, quite contrary. And let me start answering the question of CFSP, which will be the last one. I'm sure that you know that our trade is much bigger in terms of volume with Kosovo than with Russian Federation. So it's interesting element. We are very much interested in trading with Kosovo and to continue doing that. CFSP. Yes, we are aware of the fact that non-aligning with the CFSP decisions, it's a huge problem in terms of fulfilling the obligation of full alignment. But also let me remind you that our obligation is to try to progressively align until the membership, when it's going to become the obligation of Serbia. And yes, we are not able to introduce sanctions to Russian Federation for several reasons. One is the political one. This is the support to our standing ground in terms of Kosovo deal or discussing Kosovo, but also energy dependence. I'm sure and aware that you are aware of it. But again, aligning with the CFSP decision is not the only way, I hope, to prove that we are following the European values in terms of the CFSP or CSDP. I'm not sure that you know, but we are the only Western Balkan country that participate in almost all but Bosnia and Herzegovina CSDP mission of the European Union. A majority of those missions are actually our contribution, that we are participating as a special capacity of doctors and medical doctors and those special units. Unfortunate development after 90s. Also, we have now our own observer at the Northwood, at the Atalanta mission. That's also, again, support to the European values, fighting against pirates together with the Europeans. Again, we are the only only candidate participating at the European Defense Agency. We are among the first in fighting against the coalition of fighting against the terrorism. In the region, we were the first introducing foreign fighters law. So yes, not very diligent in terms of aligning with the very decision, but we are trying to prove also that there are other ways to say we are strongly behind the European values in the security issues, particularly because we are the military neutral country, and being close to the CFSP as well as the CSDP means much more to us than to others.
Thank you, Tanya. Professor, you have the floor.
Just a couple of minutes. A generic final statement, not referring to specific questions, although I think there is a common aspect to Miro's question, Tanya's intervention, my Greek colleagues, Yannis, and so on. This is our last conference before the next European elections. In the next conference in Finland, perhaps we will have a new composition, a new membership, because many of the EU people will not be there, but also we have national elections coming up. And it seems to me that at this very important turning point, I mean, for us, particularly for us coming from the south of Europe and the Balkans, it is important that we make it very clear that we are fully committed to the foundational values of the Union, and we will do everything we can to stop that kind of confusing, uncertain, and I think in reality negative attitude of the great powers towards the Western Balkans. I mean, it seems to me that we have to fight harder. And of course, one of the reasons that the great powers are now either neutral or even negative towards the Western Balkans, despite earlier promises. Of course, you're right, it was an indicative date, 2025, if, of course, the conditionalities were met and the reforms carried out. The change, I think, has everything to do with the way in which the population and the electorates, even in the rich countries, have felt over the last 10, 20, 15 years uncertain, unsafe, with great anxiety about the future. And it is precisely when this totally understandable and justified anxiety of ordinary people turns into Euroscepticism and racism, and of course for that turn to take place, you need politicians and public commentators who will interpret the anxiety because of globalization, because of the economic crisis, because of unemployment, because of the huge increases in inequality, to turn them into accusing the other person. Of course, the other, historically, throughout the 20th century, has taken many guises, whether the Jews, or now the Muslims, or indeed the people from the Western Balkans, who on the one hand, and that is another interesting paradox, we want to come and work in our factories in Western Europe and as Gastarbeiters in Germany, but on the other hand, we don't want to extend any further enlargement towards this country. So it seems to me that we have, as members of parliament, in other words, as people who are not necessarily committed to our governments. We represent our people. We have a distance from our governments, whatever they say. As representatives of the European spirit, we need to commit ourselves both in the elections, the European elections, or whatever national elections we may have in the next electoral cycle, and in our interparliamentary conferences, to becoming the guardians of that spirit. This is the job of members of parliament. This is the job of being the conscience of a European Union that is moving from existential to existential crisis, and at this point has a quite difficult future. Final word, I have been coming to this conference now for, like many of you, for 4 years, 8 conferences at least. I'm afraid that the conference has declined over the years. We stopped having conclusions. That meant that we stopped having a political discussion. Mrs. Mogherini or whoever does not turn up any longer. It seems to me that the next presidency and the next few presidencies have to recommit to this conference, because we cannot come here as part of some kind of parliamentary tourism. To the extent that we come here and have important discussions, then it seems to me that has also to be a political discussion amongst ourselves and some kind of resolution reached at the end. We need, with the European Union, to again re-strengthen and restart also this conference, which is extremely important, but it seems to me that the powers that be in Brussels are not taken very seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. All of us, we remember the declaration of Jean Monnet, the Europe is for citizens, but unfortunately sometimes Europe is for government. Yes. This is a difficult issue. We need an answer, and I hope that in your future conference in Helsinki, we have this answer. But first I want to try to be a little bit optimistic. We need a decision in this summer. It's a political one, and I believe that we can start. It's time to finish with our easy way to do politics, to sell what the people need and what the people want. We need an answer, a political answer for Europe. I believe that this answer is not complete without Western Balkans. But dear colleague, looking to what's happened in many countries in the region, I saw in Montenegro we have 4 weekly protests to resist. I saw in Serbia, I saw this in Albania, I saw some disputes in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I believe that in Brussels and in your country also, we have leaders who can take this decision. If they are impressed by this situation, the decision, I'm afraid, that will not be so positive. But we need to overcome this kind of situation, especially now in this period, because this year there are 20 years after the Yugoslavian war. Don't forget this. We need conflict, we need cohesion, we need that all the European people be together in an European Union for citizens. And this area shows us that it's how difficult it is to work with multicultural, with ethnic problems. But if we want to be democratic, if we want to assume the stability of this region, we need to overcome, and we need you behind. We need you inside of the European Union. This is my conclusion. I want to thank for this debate in this panel. I look forward to meet all of us, maybe, in Helsinki with very good results. Thank you, and I want to thank to our colleague from Romania, and especially to Cristian Dumitrescu, for this warm welcome, and I hope that you come in Bucharest for be part of this conference, but we expect you next time like a friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was a pleasure.
Before we start the last phases of our conference, I would like to convey to you a message which I received from the cabinet of Mrs. Mogherini in regard to what happened yesterday. I would like to tell you that she expresses her regret that the dialogue was not possible, in spite of the fact that, as you saw, she was open for it. We also wanted to have that dialogue, but unfortunately, due to technical conditions, this was not possible. However, I stress again, she is expressing her regret that this dialogue has not taken place. More than that, I would tell you that Gabriele, who is an old friend and works directly with Mrs. Mogherini, has arrived especially from Brussels to Bucharest overnight. And he can certainly give you some more technical detail of what has happened. And I would ask Daniele if he wants to add something to this, to what I said.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pascu, and sorry to take your time. Simply, I was sitting on the side of the High Rep yesterday when the video link was established, and she was really deeply saddened that the connection fell after a few minutes. And we were with the technicians who were checking the lines, and after let's say that the output from Brussels to Bucharest seemed okay. It was the receiving line, namely the signal which was coming from Bucharest, which seemed a little bit difficult. This was according to the technician who was assisting us in the video conference in her office. So once again, as you said, Mr. Pascu, I can just pass on the message that she was really saddened of not being able to engage with you as foreseen and as she had planned to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriele. And I would like to clarify another element. You saw that Mrs. Mogherini has attended other previous conferences, but she did not attend apparently the last three, Sofia, two, Vienna and Bucharest. And that is because the Gymnich format, the Gymnich Forum, which she is always attending, has not happened back-to-back with this conference. In our case, it has happened already, I think, in February or something like this. So she could not come a second time to Bucharest. All other instances which she attended the Interparliamentary conferences have been back-to-back. Gimnik and immediately after our conference. So that is the reason why she did not come here in person, as she could not come to Vienna last year. Thank you very much.
Mulțumesc foarte mult.
Thank you very much. Finally, we are now at the closing session of our Interparliamentarian Conference, and on this occasion, let me thank, before anything else, to all who contributed to the organization of this conference in good, smooth operating conditions, and I refer not only to the MPs, to the members of the European Parliament, to the representatives of the Foreign Policy Committee of the Romanian Parliament. I refer to the members of the national parliaments, and let's not forget their staff who contributed significantly to the organization of this conference. You are the ones who are going to decide whether it was a success or not, and at the same time, let me do what is usual and correct. Let me thank the interpreters who had done a very good job, and let me thank the ladies and the gentlemen who did the interpretation. And we have two more items before concluding. I'd like to give the floor to First Vice President Pașcu to give the floor for the amount of time he considers unnecessary to those people who participated in the organized workshops, so that conclusions could be submitted. Thank you.
Workshops. And we have established, a number of colleagues of ours who would report on them very briefly, because, we have to save time. Many people, would have to catch a plane. And I would ask you, I don't fix a limit of time, but I would ask you to stay within a reasonable limit of time. And I'm asking for the workshop A, Future of CFSP, CSDP, our friend Mr. Belder to present the conclusions. So, Mr. Belder, how do we do it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Push the button and that's it.
Yeah, quite simple. Thank you very much, dear colleague. On behalf of my dear colleague Ana Gomez, I will inform you about the conclusions. All contributions. Okay. All speakers underlined that the United Kingdom plays an important role and will play an important role for the future of the CFSP, CSDP, for the European defense. Look alone that the United Kingdom represents 1/4 of the total EU defense capabilities. Therefore, close cooperation remains an evident necessity. What was important, one of the speakers, Monsieur Jean-Jacques Bridet, is the chair of the Committee for National Defense of the French National Assembly, was very important because that was also raised by another speaker, Markus Keim, from Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik in Berlin, a German researcher, what to think about strategic autonomy. What does it mean? And what was quite clear from the comment of our French speaker, that was it is now the opportunity for Europe to give a special meaning to this concept of strategic autonomy. That means quite clearly that the European Union, that the member states should be totally responsible for the defense and the security of the territory of the member states, also of the citizens of these member states. So that's what is strategic autonomy. That is in the first place that there should be a clear understanding and also an implementation of to be responsible for our own European security and defense. The issue of the Brexit was not taken as very dramatic, and to quote again our friend speaker, it means that we should have imagination to behold the ties we have, strong ties we have in defense cooperation, and that's essential and crucial inside and even eventual outside the NATO, and that is the task for the future. That there will be perhaps it should be when there will be a Brexit, and nevertheless the existing strong defense and security cooperation will go ahead, and we should find new ways, in whichever way, bilateral, multilateral, to be that we have a strong chain, the European Union, United Kingdom, and United States, inside and outside NATO. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastian. I agree with you that when it comes to Brexit, we have to be very imaginative in what to expect. So, because one never knows. But thank you very much. And I'm asking now Mr. Doru Frunzulică, our colleague, to report on the EU strategy for the Danube region. Doru.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In fact, happily, the chairmanship of the European Union strategy for the Danube region is held by nowadays by Romania, which holds as well the presidency of the Council of the European Union. That's why Romania made a priority, to develop and for a new beginning of the European Union strategy for the Danube region under the motto, the Danube region, building cohesion for a shared prosperity. Then allow me to tell you that my country will pursue the optimal exploitation of opportunities offered during his mandate as the chairmanship of the EU SDR, and to promote all the proposed objectives and themes for boosting the strategy nowadays. In this context, of course, I would like to mention that we are looking mainly to more connection within the region, for more protection of the environment and to fight the climate change, for building prosperity and jobs, for better life for the 112 million of inhabitants coming from 14 countries, 9 members of the European Union, and 5 members from, candidate countries and associated countries. And at the end, the purpose of all these, macro-regional strategies, and nowadays the European Union has 4 of them, the Danube strategy being the second and very much linked with the Black Sea cooperation and Black Sea issues. And, looking at the challenges of this area and also to the opportunities brought by this area, at the end, the main issue is to balance towards the opportunities, because there are tremendous opportunities for development. And, the final goal, ladies and gentlemen, is to bring closer to the European Union all these 5 countries and even more in the future associated or candidate countries to the European Union. Because during this period of time where lots of challenges are upon the European Union, there is only one answer, and there is only one solution and alternative to the European Union: a stronger European Union, a more integrated European Union, the European Union as a global actor, more influential, bringing all the European people and countries inside this very successful organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Doru. Now the third workshop, Cybersecurity in Hybrid Warfare. Mr. Miro Kovac.
Thank you so much. The workshop was moderated by our friend, the member of European Parliament, Romana Manescu, who unfortunately cannot participate in this session Therefore, she has asked me to report back from the workshop what I'm doing with pleasure. Con piacere. We had a very interesting debate prompted by two excellent presentations. The first speaker, Mr. Mihnea Kostoiu, member of the Romanian Parliament and rector of the Bucharest Polytechnic University, emphasized the role of education in countering cyber and hybrid threats and advocated for the development of a culture of cybersecurity. The second speaker, Mr. Catalin Arama, General Manager of the Romanian Computer Emergency Response Team, explained the Romanian authorities' activities to strengthen cybersecurity in the context of the EU security of networks and information systems directive, which has been instrumental in enhancing cooperation between national authorities. There was a consensus within our workshop that digitalization, although hybrid warfare is not a new phenomenon, the increasing digitalization of societies and infrastructures bring with it increasing threats and vulnerabilities. Education is crucial for tackling these threats. It was pointed out that education and training should not only reach IT experts and engineers, but even more importantly, the general population, as well as parliamentarians. This must also include education on the risks of disinformation, which is one of the main dimensions of hybrid warfare. Finally, the need for global rules for the cyberspace was stressed. Even if not all countries sign up, this would be a big step forward in defining global standards and ensuring accountability. In conclusion, much has been done already in recent years to counter cyber and hybrid threats. However, a lot still remains to be done, as our capabilities are still inadequate given the threats and challenges we are facing. More cooperation is needed between the different institutions involved in cybersecurity at the national and European levels, and that means that we need the next time the High Representative, Mrs. Mogherini, or her successor, to come to a conference in Finland and later in Croatia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know that the trick is to have the Gimnik reunion back-to-back with the conference. So that's the secret. Thank you very much, Mr. Kovac. Now the last workshop, military mobility. And here Mr. Victor Bostinaru, who has had a non-happy event in his family, had to leave. And he has asked our colleague, Mrs. Auke de Vries, to present the conclusions in his stead. Thank you very much. Mrs. Auke de Vries. Yes, we spotted you. Yes, yes. Try another one. Mr. Kovac, would you close your...
Yes.
Oh, that's...
Okay.
Now it's working. Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
mobility.
That's technology.
You see, you honor the title of the workshop.
Yes. Well, in the workshop, we discussed the importance of military mobility. And as the Dutch Minister of Defense mentioned before, how can it be that those who protect our freedom are themselves not allowed to move freely? We had an interesting discussion which mainly focused on the implementation of the political agreements that have been agreed upon last summer at the highest level of both NATO and EU. And these agreements need to be implemented by the end of 2019. And they include developing national plans for military mobility, granting cross-border movement permissions within 5 working days, and establishing national points of contact for all aspects relating to military mobility. And we discussed the challenges we face in EU-NATO cooperation and, for example, the exchange of information. Important information needed to improve military mobility in Europe is often classified and therefore cannot be shared. A solution to this has to be found, was one of the conclusions. We also discussed the importance of dual use of civil infrastructure. It is important to improve the infrastructure for movement of military personnel and equipment, while at the same time improving civilian transport conditions. Finally, we also discussed the role of national parliament in improving military mobility. As the bodies which scrutinize the work of government, we have to ensure that what is agreed is actually put into effect. If legislation or procedures need to be adjusted or money is needed to raise bridges or widen roads, the parliaments have to decide on that. As national parliaments, we therefore must play an active role and continue to urge our governments to implement the agreements on military mobility in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. De Vries. Now I'm handing over to to our colleague Dumitrescu, to present to you the statement, the final statement.
Doamnelor și domnilor colegi.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, let me thank you a lot, Vice President, Vice Chairperson. We are now reaching the end of this conference, and as usual, we will speak about or we will speak about the final statement or the final declaration. But let me tell you before that today was a great day of joy for me. First of all, because declaration signed upon the initiative of our female colleagues from the national parliaments and European Parliament was adopted on the significant input and contribution of our female colleagues and their contribution to the success of this type of conference, and I was very glad to read this recommendation. If we want for things to be better in the future, we need to increase their number. That is what we tried to do, so we increased the number of our female panelists during the last session. And another moment of joy was for me when I heard two colleagues, the Greek representative and the North Macedonian representative. They both shared with us the fact that political maturity and good understanding of European values needs peace and stability, and that can lead to very positive results. And I'm also overjoyed to tell you because very many years ago I was the one who did the report for the accession of FYROM to the Council of Europe, and I congratulate them on this occasion. And as regards the final declaration, as it happened in Vienna and before that, at the meeting organized by our colleagues in Estonia, we have a declaration of the two chairpersons, the chairperson of the Foreign Policy Committee in the European Parliament and the co-president or the head of delegation of the organizing country. This is a complete or comprehensive document. We discussed it and we agreed upon its format during the round of works that we had at the beginning of this conference in our Troika. I have never been happy when international conferences ended with non-negotiated conclusions. And that is why, for the future, perhaps the new Parliament and the new Commission and the new conditions will provide for a return to that habit of negotiating documents so that these could be more powerful as they would be adopted through a vote. Now, the document that we are going to submit to you, in the opinion of my colleague, is a balanced declaration highlighting, as all of you saw it because we shared it with you, so which dwells on all the topics that we approached. It highlights our opinions and our thoughts about very important topics for Europe: the Eastern Partnership, the situation in the Western Balkans. We also dwelled on it, on the Danube strategy in this document, about the CSDP triangle. And let me tell you that all these issues, including the Brexit talk or the workshop on the hybrid warfare, were elements that we tackled with the utmost seriousness. I am also overjoyed to tell you that more than 100 of our colleagues took the floor in this conference. If we because we included the moderators and the speakers during the panels, and that is not little. It tells us that all the people present in this conference were truly witnessing this conference for a constructive exchange of ideas for the future. And that is, in my opinion, the greatest profit of such conferences. They involve fundamental actors in the European decision-making process, meaning the European Parliament and the national parliaments. So they are vocal. So these are important voices in this respect. If you don't have any other comments with respect to the text, I would like to wish to those candidates to the European Parliament and who are also members of the European Parliament who came to Bucharest to participate and honor this conference as it's the custom. So I would like to congratulate them as well for it. Yes? Thank you. Please.
And I am a member of the Greek delegation. Just a comment about this final statement, which is produced as a product of the co-presidency. In other words, the Romanian presidency and the European Parliament. And this is saying that this is reflecting the different views during the different discussions. But there are a few issues, for example, the qualified majority voting, which, I mean, serious issues, which are not discussed extensively. So I think we have two options. One, to discuss all these issues, which is not realistic this time. And the second, I propose this statement to be given as a sole product of the presidency and not co-presidency. I mean, the Romanian presidency. Thank you.
Mulțumesc foarte mult. E o întrebare.
Thank you very much. It's a pertinent question and comment, but I have an answer to it, and I will also ask the first Vice President to give you an answer to your comment. First of all, the elements that you called into discussion are not featuring in the preamble of this declaration. So it's not the outcome of a discussion that took place between the organizers and the AFET committee. So we have not discussed this issue. Then we have the issues that we discussed, and I think you agree that the declaration reflects those. Secondly, and which is most important in my opinion, this declaration signed not by Romania as holding the presidency of the EU Council, it will be signed by Mr. McAllister, who is the president of the AFET committee, and then the president of the national delegation. So it's this position which is reflected and committed to the two co-presidents. So it is the outcome that we give you following the talks that we've had. And now I'm going to give the floor to the co-president to give you an answer with respect to what you highlighted.
These ideas have been mentioned in the report of our Foreign Affairs Committee on Common Security and Defense Policy. So they are mentioned there. There were numerous amendments who would like them to be there. But at the same time, we have realized that this is not a reality yet. And therefore, you know, the phrase is worse, these things which you mentioned, modifications, and the phrase is concluding with worse, a deeper analysis before being contemplated by the member states. So whatever the Parliament would write there, whatever we do here subscribe to, the countries will have to accept them. Even in my speech, I have introduced, when we mention this, I have introduced the phrase, if adopted, when adopted. So therefore, you know, it's up for the states to decide whether this become reality or not, but the ideas, as we said, are worth being investigated. So this is what I would like to clarify in this respect.
Thank you very much for your question. Mulțumesc foarte mult pentru
Thank you very much for your question. Allow me now, as it is usual, because we are the two committees of Foreign Affairs and Defense. We are a parliament with two chambers, to give the floor to the chairman of the Committee for Defense in the Chamber of Deputies in order to present the final speech. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of our meeting, first of all, I would like to wish you all a safe and good journey back. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for accepting to be here in Bucharest. The involvement in the Parliament activity is the best example of the multilateral cooperation. I hope that these 2 days have been constructive for our common projects, for our common future, and for our common defense. This format offers us the opportunity to develop multilateral relations, but also to deepen the bilateral dialogue. I have seen in the hall many friends, and I have met future partners. Together with you, we succeeded to reach all the important topics. One of the priorities was the celebration of 10 years of the Eastern Partnership. In the same time, our geostrategical position of Romania and the responsibility of the protection of the European Union border offered us the occasion to discuss about the cooperation between NATO and the EU and the potential mechanisms of making this possible using the new tools of the security and defense policy, as also the cooperation with the candidate states or those who have done important steps in the institutional reform in order to achieve integration as Western Balkans. The debates applied in the workshops assured the continuity with the priorities of the previous presidencies, and I hope a challenge for the future interparliamentary conferences. Dear friends, thank you very much, and please join in applauding those who have contributed to organize this.